This week on Aprender Inglés con Reza and Craig, we have a special guest, Wayne, singer, songwriter, a teacher extraordinaire and dear colleague of ours at our school. Welcome, Wayne, to the podcast.
Hello, thank you. Thank you. I'm an avid listener and it's great to be here.
And of course, as usual, my co-host Reza. Hi, Reza.
Hi, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. What are we speaking about this week, guys?
Stress? Shall we speak about stress?
Let's speak about word stress.
Not nervous stress.
Not nervous stress, but word stress. But before we get to that, let's listen to some feedback we've received this week from Christian from Mexico City.
Hello, Reza and Craig. This is Christian from Mexico City. I want to say thank you for your podcast. I listen to your podcast every morning when I am driving at my work. I want to say you thank you because of your podcast. I have been improved my English and taken to the next level in grammar way, in listening, in talking, and now I can talk better in English. For example, every morning on Monday, I have a conference call by phone with American people, and I can understand the requirements of the projects. I can communicate my ideas in English. I can communicate the issues. I can understand American people by phone. I want to say you that I think 3 years ago, I can't do that. So now I am so grateful with you.
So thank you very much, Christian, for sending us your voice message all the way from Mexico City. Any comments, Reza?
Yes, I noticed that you did say a few things which perhaps we need to correct. You said that you listen to the podcast, and thanks very much. You listen when you're driving at work. That's not the right preposition. You should say when you're driving to work. When you're driving to work, you listen to the podcast. Did you notice anything, Wayne?
Yeah, I noticed something which a lot of my students make the same mistake. He said, say you quite a lot. And in English, we normally use tell when we have an object. For example, you or me or us.
Also, Christian, whose pronunciation was very, very clear. So well done, Christian, on very clear pronunciation. But you also said, I've been improved. With the present perfect continuous, remember to use the continuous form. So I have been improving or I have been improving. Okay. Anything else, guys?
I thought he had a lot of good vocabulary.
Yep. Although I did notice one more little grammar mistake, Christian. We understood you, but you said 3 years ago, I can't do that. But 3 years ago is the past. So you should say 3 years ago, I couldn't do that. Or I wasn't able to do that is possible as well. That's the past of can.
But really good to hear from you, Christian. And if you would like to send us more feedback, we'd always be happy to hear from you in the future. Next, we have a voice message from Mamin.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Reza. This is Mamin from BSCAS. How are you doing? I've just listened to your podcast, your last podcast about British music, and I love it. The reason why I love it is because I also studied music when I was young. I studied at the conservatory, and I used to play piano and saxophone. I left it when I was 20, in my 20s. I don't know exactly. And today I had my first guitar class, and I'm so excited because I love the guitar, and finally I decided to start to study. So I want to share with you, and also to speak about one group that I think that you didn't mention, which is called Traffic. for me it's very important because it's so amazing and it's has a personal motive, and well, that's all. And sorry, I forget. And I also want to share with you that I start to study again at the EOI, and I'm so happy because it's a very nice group of people with a very high level of English, so I have to study a lot. This time it will be the time. So bye, kiss.
Thanks for your message, Mamen. Always a pleasure to hear from you on the show. Reza, any comments? Did you know she was a musician? I had no idea.
No, and it just so happens that Craig and I have met Mamen in person. Do you remember?
Yeah,
when
a while
she
ago, no?
happened to be visiting Valencia. So Mamen's a very loyal fan. But I didn't know that she'd studied music and she knew all about it. Wow, Mamen, you're full of surprises. Very interesting. By the way, I was also a fan of Traffic myself years ago. I'd kind of forgotten about them, but when I was a teenager, I really liked them. That kind of psychedelic rock.
Any comments on Mamen's message, Wayne?
Yeah. I thought, first of all, that she spoke extremely fluently and very, very quickly. Her pronunciation was very, very clear. I'm not so sure that the word conservatory is right here, because in English, a conservatory is part of a house, and I don't imagine Mamen studied music in the part of her house. We normally use in English, we use the word conservatoire, which is a French word. We use the French word. Also, she said that she left it, which I think is a direct translation from Spanish. I would say, not to say, but she stopped doing it.
Can I just add a bit of trivia to that? A fact that neither Craig nor Wayne know, but I actually many years ago, when I was 17 years old, went for an audition at a conservatoire.
No way.
In Manchester, the Royal Northern College of Music. And I didn't get in. But hey, at least I got to visit Manchester. It was my very first time in Manchester, and it was a nice experience, but I wasn't good enough to get in.
Did you have an audition?
Yeah, I had an audition to get into the Royal Northern College of Music.
And which instrument were you playing?
Violin.
The violin?
Yeah, but I wasn't good enough.
Oh, and you were a teenager back then,
Yeah.
Was that 1930s, 40s?
Yeah, the 30s,
okay.
Between the two wars.
Okay.
Mamen, you're lucky. We've got a guitarist here. Wayne plays the guitar.
I don't play the guitar.
I've seen you play the guitar.
Yeah, but I stand on stage with the guitar and pretend to play the guitar. I'm just a karaoke singer. That's really.
He's very modest. One more clarification for our Latin American listeners who might not know that Mamen has started studying again at the EOI, which is Escuela Oficial de Idiomas, which is a government-funded or government-supported school of languages here in Spain. Next, we have a message from Hector Nieves, who's a new listener. So let's listen to Hector.
Hi, Riz and Craig. My name is Hector Nieves. I'm a new listener. I came across your podcast 2 weeks ago on my way to work, and I find it very interesting and humorous. And I've been listening to your podcast ever since. So I guess I just want to say thank you for your time and for your efforts, and keep the good work. You guys are doing great. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you very much, Hector, for your voice message. Always a pleasure to welcome new listeners. Any comments, guys, on Hector's message?
Well, first of all, is he American? Because he sounds American.
He has very, very good pronunciation.
Extremely good pronunciation. A nice phrasal verb there as well with come across. I came across your show. Ever since was a nice expression as well. Yeah. What do you think, Reza?
Yeah, and very fluent. And I didn't notice any mistakes at all.
Yep.
Really
on my way to work. I really like that expression.
Yeah.
I came across the podcast on my way. And another, I guess I just want to say thank you. That's quite an American English expression, isn't it? Because we would probably say, I suppose. I suppose I want to thank you, or I guess I want to thank you. Yeah. And also notice the way he fluently used I want to, and he said I wanna, which is an informal way of saying I want to, I wanna. And also have a good one at the end. What does that mean, have a good one? have a good day, perhaps?
Good day it means, really, doesn't it?
Have a good day.
As Wayne mentioned, you have an American accent, Hector. We'll be talking more about that a little bit later because it's related to our main theme for today.
Which is, Wayne?
Word stress.
Word stress. So, where do we begin? We have spoken a little bit about word stress in the past, haven't we? But we haven't really looked at the rules. I think we said, don't worry about the rules because they're too complicated.
What rules? What rules?
It's very difficult to talk about rules when you talk about word stress, but we can talk about tendencies. We can talk about things that tend to happen with word stress. And I think it's a very, very good choice of subject because word stress is extremely important. A few years ago, I sent some recordings of my students knew about this, to some of my friends in England and my parents who have no knowledge of Spanish at all, okay, have no knowledge of the false friends that they could be. And the problems they had in understanding were directly linked to inaccuracy in word stress, more than inaccuracy in the pronunciation of vowels or things like that. For example, there are many words which between English and Spanish are the same. For example, local and local, and an incorrect word stress, it really creates difficulties.
Yeah, it's a good point because I would probably have said maybe connected speech or weak forms or something like that would be the main problem. That's really interesting that you found it to be word stress. So if we look then at word stress tendencies or maybe tips, consejos that we can give you to help you put the correct word stress on different words. Words have syllables, don't they? Some words have 2, 3, 4, or 1 syllable. Does that help us with where we put the stress? Is there anything that could help guide the listeners?
Yeah, there are, as Wayne says, tendencies, patterns which tend to repeat. Well, I tell you what, let's start by talking about 2-syllable words. So a syllable is a part of a word. So, for example, the word refund. Refund. It's got 2 syllables. It's got 2 parts. And English, just like Spanish, requires you to stress, to emphasize one part stronger than the rest. You have to if there's more than 1 syllable. Thing is, in Spanish, the rules are a bit clearer and you have accents to mark it, but in English, you just kind of have to know. But there are patterns. Refund, or export, or China, or label, they are nouns. And Wayne, what would you say about stress of nouns with?
I'd say most 2-syllable nouns have the stress on the first syllable. But as you said, then it is a tendency, and there are exceptions. For example, today has a stress on the second. But my advice is if you see a new word and you don't know how to pronounce it, well, look in the dictionary. But also you could take this as a general tendency that you put the stress on the first syllable with 2-syllable nouns. What about adjectives, Reza?
With adjectives as well, the stress tends to be on the first syllable when there are 2 syllables anyway. Craig, can you think of any common adjectives we could use as examples?
Well, I'm very happy. I wouldn't say I'm very happy. So I would stress the first syllable with adjectives that have 2 syllables. More examples: yellow, lovely, stupid, and helpful. But there are some exceptions, aren't there, Wayne? We don't always apply this tendency.
I'd imagine, I'm trying to think of some now. I think upset, for example, all right, are you all right? Obtuse, yeah.
So yeah, it's more of a guide than an actual rule, but that would help you if you remember that if you have an adjective with 2 syllables, probably, although not always, the stress will be on the first syllable.
And a noun.
And a noun as well, yeah. Let's move on to another group of words that have first syllable stress, something that we've spoken about before, haven't we, Reza? Compound nouns. Do you remember that lesson way back 3 years ago when we spoke about housework, for example?
Exactly. Housework and homework and the difference between the two. So, a compound noun, just to quickly remind you, is a word made up of two words. So, house is a word. Work is a word, but you can put them together and you get one new word, which is housework. So when you have a compound noun like housework, football, software, whiteboard, goalkeeper, the stress usually comes on the first syllable. There may be one or two exceptions, but not many to that. Nearly always the stress comes on the first syllable.
I think, I read that you can put the stress on the second syllable or the second element of compound nouns when the first word describes what the second word is made of. For example, cheese sandwich, tomato ketchup, or the location of it. For example, car stereo. It's a stereo in the car.
Oh, that's a really good tip. That's really good. I'd never thought of that before.
Again, it's a tendency. I'm sure there are exceptions.
And remember, listeners, that a compound noun written, it can look like just one word with no spaces, no gaps, like housework or football. But also, a compound noun can have a space in the middle, so it can look like two words, like voice recorder. We got the word voice, we got the word recorder. But a voice recorder is a thing. It's one thing. It's one compound noun. And the rule still applies. If it's a compound noun, you'll probably stress the first word and therefore probably the first syllable. So voice recorder. Although the word recorder in itself has three syllables, so it has its own stress. It's recorder. It's not recorder. And it's not recorder. It's recorder. But that stress on recorder is much less important than the stress on voice, because it's a compound noun, so that has to get the main stress. Voice recorder.
And it's important to get this, talking about three-syllable words, it's important to get the stress right on important, isn't it? Because if you... so it doesn't come out as impotent, for example.
Yeah, that could cause problems indeed.
It depends on the context, I suppose.
So up until now, we've spoken about putting the stress on the first syllable of a word. Let's look at some tips or some hints and some help that we can give you regarding stress on the second syllable. Wayne, any ideas on that? Second syllable stress?
Well, two-syllable verbs tend to have their stress on the last syllable, the second syllable. Okay, for example, begin or collect, or you mentioned recorder before, record, complain. Can you think of any others, guys?
Yes. Do you remember we had the word earlier, the noun export? Well, what about if I were to say export? And also we had the noun earlier, increase. But what if I were to say increase? I've changed the stress, and that's because I'm changing the noun to a verb. So there are quite a few words in English which are written the same for nouns and verbs. And if it's a noun, you'll probably stress the first syllable, like increase or export. And then if it's a verb, you're going to stress the second syllable, increase, export.
Yeah, we also had the noun refund before, which also works, doesn't it? Because you ask for a refund, that's the noun, but can you refund my money? So the stress changes to the second syllable.
Record is another example. And as the noun record, as something that you listen to. Have you got any traffic records?
I don't think I do have any records now. It's been a while. But of course, even to this rule, there are exceptions. Wayne, can you think of any verbs which are stressed on the first syllable?
Travel, for example. Not travel. I like travel. Travel sounds nice. I think travel is just someone trying to sound exotic and French. Study is another example. Lengthen.
Funny you mentioned people trying to sound exotic or French or something like that. I remember there was a humorous TV program in Britain called The Dinner Ladies. Do you remember The Dinner Ladies?
No.
Victoria Wood. And
Was
the
this
caretaker.
when you were a teenager? Was
Yes,
when
this
you were
is
a teenager?
this is a long time ago, back when traffic were popular. And the caretaker, El Portero, he was called Bernard. But when certain people spoke to him, like the managing director, they called him Bernard. Of course, suddenly they changed the stress. It's very American and very fine. Bernard, could you come down to the canteen, please?
Because the word stress between American English and British English is very quite different. You know, we say for example Robin Hood, and they say Robin Hood. Ice cream and ice cream, and peanut butter. My apologies if there are any Americans listening.
That's not a criticism. It's just noticing the difference with our brothers over the seas.
I'm apologising for butchering their pronunciation.
So let's go on with penultimate stress, which is words that have more than 2 syllables in which the second syllable from the end is stressed. Any examples?
Yep, photographic.
Mm-hmm.
So the penultimate photographic is stressed. Geographic. Any more examples you can think of, Wayne?
Psychiatric. Am I allowed to say pornographic?
You can.
You
Okay.
can. Pornographic is acceptable.
Good. Just it's,
The word pornographic, we're not saying pornography is acceptable, just clarifying the word pornographic.
Which has different stress, by the way. Pornography.
yeah, of course, yeah. And these are all words that end in ic. No, they end in ic.
Yep.
The suffix ic. So is that? Could you just say there's a rule? There's a tendency there.
Yes, if they end in IC, it's probably going to be that penultimate syllable stressed.
Well spotted. Yeah. So I see photographic, geographic, pornographic, psychiatric is another one. Mm-hmm. And we also have a tendency with words ending in SION and TION. So shun, for example, confusion.
Comprehension, depression.
Assassination, constitution.
Ambition. So all of those words stress the penultimate syllable, the one before last.
Which is important for Spanish speakers because naturally the equivalent in Spanish, which ends in thion and sion, normally the stress falls on that syllable, on the last syllable, for información, for example, comunicación.
So it's confusing. Okay, so moving on then to is it anti-penultimate stress or the third syllable from the end? So what do we have for any help we can give the listeners with words with 3 syllables or more? What's the guide for that?
Well, for example, photographer. So we have 4 syllables, photographer. Third syllable from the end, to, is the stress one, photographer. Enjoyable.
Spectacular. Democracy.
So we can say perhaps that words ending in CY, TY, PHY and GY are usually stressed third syllable from the end.
Mm-hmm.
And something that somebody mentioned earlier, Wayne or Craig, I can't remember who now, and I'm stealing their idea. Photographer, so it's the third syllable from the end, which is stressed. But when we have the word photographic, the stress moves towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
Very often when the word gets longer, the more syllables get added, the stress moves towards the end.
I never thought about that.
So photograph, it's on the first syllable. Photographer, it's on the second syllable. Photographic, it's moving to the third syllable, or photographically, or etc.
And it's also important to notice that the stress changes often when we change word groups. So from noun to adjective to verb, etc., the stress very often changes, as in Reza's example, photograph, photographer, and photographic.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, very often when the stress changes, because the type of word changes, the pronunciation also slightly changes. It's photograph, but it's photographer. So photograph, the second syllable, photo, it's a schwa, isn't it? It's that sound, that really lazy sound. But in photographer, it's a different vowel sound.
Can I say something about the schwa? I think the schwa is so important for pronunciation, and it's quite difficult for a lot of non-native speakers to pronounce. But I think one of the most important things about stressing isn't so much the strong syllable, but it's the weak syllables. It's the unstressing. So being able to pronounce the schwa, which if you've seen it, it looks like the letter E upside down. Being able to pronounce that is, is really important. Craig, can you give us one of your schwas? How would you pronounce the schwa?
Well, it's the sound I make when I wake up Monday morning and think of work, and it's So I would say a pen or computer or sister, brother, mother. It's the most common sound in English, and as Wayne says, really important for you to try to practice and get right. And it's sin esfuerzo, it's without effort, so it's just a really, really lazy
Really relaxed. You have to relax all your muscles and you're supposed to pronounce it. You call it your Monday morning sound. I call it my Friday afternoon when I get home from work. It's more of a relief sound. It's like that when you come home from work.
Just think of doing your English homework and it's that's the sound.
But I agree with you, what you say, Wayne, about you should be relaxed when you say it. However, I say to my students, be careful. Don't get too obsessed with schwa. Recognize it, but don't make an effort to do it, because then you'll sound silly. It kind of just has to come out naturally, as you say, when you're relaxed. So, photograph. So I say to my students, so the second sound is weak schwa, but don't make a big effort to do it, because then you'll sound silly. If you go photograph, that just sounds crazy. You know what I mean? It's got to come out naturally.
It's a really good point, Reza. Really good point. And my students do get obsessed about it, because I'm obsessed with it, probably. Yeah, and they would say things like photograph like that, which does defeat the whole object, and they end up stressing.
It's supposed to be
syllables.
weak. It's supposed to be débil. One more final thing with third syllable from the end stress. Words ending in AL, for example, impractical, nutritional, critical, and political all have the stress 3 syllables from the end. So words ending in AL also in that group.
Which is not like Spanish at all. I think Spanish words ending in AL, they tend to stress the AL, don't they?
Yeah.
Can't think of one right now, obviously.
Banal.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're following this lesson and you're a little confused, which may happen, you can find the show notes and all these examples over on the website at inglespodcast.com/180. Now, what I thought we'd do as a little experiment is to see if we agree on where we'd put the stress on a list of words that I've randomly selected, and see if we agree where the stress should be put, because maybe even native speakers don't agree on where the stress will be. So I'm not going to say the word, I'm going to say the word last. So we're going to go Reza, Wayne, Craig, and then see if we say these words the same and stress the right syllable. What's the first word, Reza, on your list?
Television.
Television.
Television. No problems there.
No.
We agree.
Do you agree it could also be pronounced television?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Yeah.
Is this a geographical thing?
No idea. That's why I wanted to try it, because you're from the north, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Where from exactly?
I'm from Blackpool. It's near Manchester.
Okay. And you're from Belfast and I'm from London. Mm-hmm. Nice selection of regional differences, but we all agree that television has the stress on the second syllable from the end.
I like your London pronunciation with the words that end with AL. Impractical, political. I quite like that. You sound like a gangster.
I didn't say that, did I?
Practical. No.
Well, you say
It's
practical.
isn't it, mate?
You
say, God blimey, it's practical.
But the L is like a ooh, almost.
Well, okay, Wayne, take off your teacher head for a second. How would you say it in Blackpool?
Practical.
How would you say it?
Practical.
Practical. Yeah, I suppose I do a little
Just
bit.
a little bit of a whir.
A little bit of a whir. What's the next word, Reza?
Oregano.
Oregano. Mm-hmm.
Oregano, but yeah, maybe that's an American difference, because they definitely say oregano, don't they? So they stress the second syllable.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I've never actually used it in England. I didn't know it existed until I went to Italy. So I've always pronounced it oregano.
The Italian way.
Yeah, the Italian way. Yeah.
Reza, next one.
Adult.
Adult.
Adult. Could it be adult?
Is that American?
Or is that
Adult?
adjective noun?
No, I think Americans just generally say adult,
Adult, yeah.
whether it's
Okay.
a noun or an adjective.
Robin Hood was an adult.
So it's an American English, British English difference. We say adult, they say adult. Mm-hmm. Okay. Next word.
Controversy.
Controversy.
I don't know how I say
Whatever comes out, do whatever comes out naturally. Don't think about it.
controversy. Controversy.
Same as me, yeah.
Controversy. Yeah. So it, obviously
So
it's
wait,
not,
why do you have to be different to Craig and I?
I just want to be different. That's
So-
all. No, I'm obviously the weirdo here then, and I have no idea. I have no answer why I pronounce it like that.
so it's not an American English, British English difference.
I really don't know. I've always said controversy. It sounds...
Okay.
It
'Cause
might
it
be
sounds
a
right.
Blackpool thing or North of England.
Yeah, it's probably just in my house we say it like this. Yeah.
So there you have it, listeners. Not all native speakers agree on the same word stress with some words. So it could be pronounced controversy or controversy. Next word?
Depends.
Ah,
I'm reading it
well
in front of me.
spotted.
Depends. If it's a noun, I'm saying contrast. And if it's a verb, probably contrast.
I would completely agree with you, Reza. Yeah, completely. And well spotted. I would have probably just pronounced it as contrast, as the noun.
Although I remember years ago I worked with an FCE oral examiner for the speaking test, the Cambridge speaking tests. And do you remember when we used to do the speaking tests, the thing we said at the beginning of part 2 with the pictures was compare and contrast?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this guy always said compare and contrast. And it really annoyed me. And because...
English teacher.
Because he was an English teacher, I won't say his name, but he was very, very highly qualified and worked at the university. I didn't correct him, but every test he mispronounced the stress on that word, treating it as a verb and not, treating it as a noun and not a verb.
Did you know? Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Why at the time? It wasn't just a feeling that it was annoying. It didn't sound. It sounded cacophonic. It sounded wrong. Or did you know it was because he was pronouncing a verb as a noun? Or
Both.
okay.
It annoyed me incredibly, and I knew why it annoyed me because I'm a teacher. So both. What's the next word?
Cigarette.
Really? You say cigarette? Cigarette.
Cigarette.
Do I? Cigarette. But you know what? I'd like to change my answer and say that I say
No.
I say both.
Okay.
You can't change your answer
Well,
now.
hold on. I'm not changing my answer. I'm adding to my answer.
Okay.
Cigarette. I say both. You know, they both sound all right to me, and I do say both. Yeah. It depends what mood I'm in, I guess. So sometimes I stress the first syllable, cigarette, and sometimes the last, cigarette. Honestly, I do. I use both.
I believe you.
Are you a smoker, Reza?
I am an occasional smoker.
Okay.
Yeah.
A social smoker.
Social smoker, yeah.
What's the next one?
Magazine.
Magazine.
Magazine. Mm-hmm. No problems there.
But some people might say
Magazine. Yeah. That sounds okay to me. I'd accept that. Magazine. Next one?
Decade.
Descartes. No. Yeah.
Pretentious, moi?
Decade.
Decade. Mm-hmm. And you said decade.
No, I said decade.
Oh, you
as
said
well.
decade.
I
So
also stressed the first
we
syllable.
agree. So obviously decade is 10 years, and we agree on the pronunciation. Stress the first syllable, decade. What's the next word, Reza?
Well, in my accent, perfume.
In my accent, perfume.
And in my accent, perfume. But I have heard it said perfume,
Me too. Yeah.
which is maybe leaning to the French origin of the word.
But usually more in American accents, yeah? Perfume.
Yes, maybe it's an American English, British English thing, perhaps.
A bit like decade, which a lot of Americans will say. We all said decade, but a lot of Americans say
Okay.
decade.
Yeah. The next word should be interesting for American English speakers. Reza, what do you think?
Garage.
Garage for me as well.
Garage for me, but garage. Is that American English? British
I think
English?
no. In Britain, I've heard garage.
Is it a class thing?
I think it is. To me, it sounds like upper middle class, almost garage. Yeah. Same with scone and scone. What would you say? Scone. Obviously, I would say scone. And this is, how do you describe a scone? It's like a cake that you cut in two with sultanas and raisins, and you spread butter on it, so it's really unhealthy but very tasty. How would you pronounce it?
Scone.
Scone. I'd say scone.
I'm with Reza's cigarettes. I would go either way, scone or scone. I think both. I think both are correct.
Okay.
So I would, depending on.
Yeah. You go either way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I go either way.
Yeah. You're talking about garage being upper middle class, perhaps posh accent. In the UK, yeah. But I think in American English, it's just everybody.
Okay.
Everybody says garage.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're right.
They don't have a choice, no?
Yeah,
It's garage.
standard.
So you have your Ferrari in your garage and your Ford Cortina, your Ford Fiesta in your garage. Next word.
Ballet.
Ballet. No, wait. Sorry, we have to cut this. No, let me think.
Controversy, or is it
controversy?
controversy?
No, ballet. We don't say ballet. Who am I trying to impress? I say ballet.
Ballet, yeah.
But Americans say ballet.
And the Spanish would say ballet, wouldn't they? They pronounce the T at the
Yes.
end. Like we're a little more faithful to the original French, I think, with words and with et, like ballet.
There's valet.
Okay, valet.
Valet.
Yeah, valet.
And now the last one, I heard on a podcast recently where two American men pronounced the stress differently than the way we would pronounce the stress on this last word. How would you say this last word, Reza?
Details.
The same, details.
The same, details. Although I think in American English they would say details.
Okay.
Because I heard it several times on the same podcast spoken by both co-hosts who happen to be American. So again, the stress can change depending on where you come from and depending on maybe your social status and also depending on if it's American English or British English. Now, the longest word in the dictionary. Is it the next word?
Well, it used to be, but I think it's just been... The record's just been broken by a new word, some medical word that I can't remember right now. But it used to be the longest word.
What is it?
Anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Anti-disestablishmentarianism. Yeah, we agree on that.
There are 12 syllables in that word.
But how many in supercalifragilisticexpialidocious?
But is that in the dictionary?
It's in my dictionary.
Apparently there is a word that's longer. It's got 30 letters and it's a word that refers to a lung disease, which you
you're
contract from... Is it
medical
contract or contract?
Contract.
Contract, because it's a
verb. Two
Yep.
syllables.
Contract from the inhalation of fine silica particles. I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but if you go to the website, you can see it written.
That's a problem because I imagine it's a word we use every day, no?
No, it's not used every day. Do you know the longest commonly used word that has 20 letters that maybe we do use every day? It's uncharacteristically, which has 20 letters, and that's quite common, isn't it? You'd use that probably quite a lot. Okay, before we head out the door, are there any final comments on word stress, Reza?
No.
Okay, Wayne, any final comments to wrap up, which means to finish the podcast?
Okay, I just want to stress thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I just want to stress the importance of accurate word stress. And I would say that you listeners out there, when you're learning a new word, you should really look in the dictionary and find the stress. It's as important as learning to pronounce the individual sounds of the word, but learn where the stress is. And the stress in dictionaries is normally marked with an apostrophe, isn't it? I think that's the standard way of marking stress in dictionaries.
The apostrophe is just before the stress syllable, right?
That's right, yeah. So word stress is important. Word stress matters.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Wayne, for joining us today. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you? Are you on Facebook, Twitter? Do you want to give an email address?
Probably in the pub.
Yeah, I can't add anything to what Reza said. Yeah, in the pub. Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Wayne Flint Valencia.
Wayne Flint Valencia. Thanks very much. And Reza, where can they contact you?
I might be in the pub as well, but if I'm not, you could send me an email to belfastreza@gmail.com.
And emails to me at craig@inglespodcast.com. And of course, you can contact us on SpeakPipe with your voice message. That's speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. And speaking of pronunciation, why not try our new audio course, which is called Mención Intermedio Audio. You have 14 lessons. That's 9 hours of audio in MP3 and a full detailed transcription in PDF formats. So in the course, you'll find grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation. So we teach you the IPA symbols of the diphthongs, monophthongs, consonant sounds, and vowel sounds. You'll also learn connected speech, where to put the stress, weak forms, and typical problems that Spanish speakers have with their pronunciation. You can find that course at store.mencioningles.net, and there's a link to that in the show notes for this episode. And if you'd like detailed show notes, why not join our Patreon program over at patreon.com/Ingles Podcast. Reza, let's thank our sponsors.
Many thanks to our lovely Patreon sponsors who are Pedro, Manuel Garcia, Maite, Sara, Carlos, Zara, Lorena, Lara, Mamen, Juan, Cory Finneran, Mariel, Jorge, Raúl López, Rafael, Maria, Manuel Tarazona, Agus, Nestor Garcia from NestorGM.com, that's Luces Extrañas, Juan Carlos, Rafa Pancels, Beatriz, José Luis, and Miren. Thank you very much to all of you.
And thanks, as always, to our transcribers who have given their time and their work for free for your benefit to look at transcribed episodes of this podcast. That's Arminda from Madrid, Alberto from Granada, and Angelica Bello, also from Madrid. And the episodes we have for your pleasure are 131 to 142, and the first 7 episodes, 1 to 7. Thanks to Angelica. Thanks, of course, to Wayne. Thanks for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. You're always welcome to come back whenever you like.
Thank you. I've loved it. It's been an honour to be on your show.
Thanks very much. Reza, what are we speaking about next week?
Well, I might catch your interest if I say we're talking about sex.
Let's talk about sex.
No way.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.